Today on The Real Story, state employees frustrated with Governor Malloy for announcing that layoff notices will be going out in a matter of days to balance the budget, unless they agree to new concessions. The unions say, no, wait, we've already done that twice in recent years. First this morning, we have questions for 3 state employees.
And education leaders are worried the state's budget crisis could mean additional cuts. They say they're not asking the governor for anything more. They just want their funding levels to stay the same. Members of the What Will Our Children Lose coalition join us today with their concerns.
Also, Team 26, a group of bicyclists preparing today for another road trip from Newtown to Washington in memory of the 26 children and adults who were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School. The riders want Congress to take notice and do more to reduce gun violence, which they call a public health crisis. Team leader Monty Frank is here. It's all today on The Real Story. Hello there, you're watching The Real Story. I'm Al Terzi alongside Jen Bernstein.
Thank you, Alan. Hello to everyone at home.
But next, more on the state's budget woes and concern about the potential impact of spending cuts on our children's education. You're watching The Real Story.
Welcome back. Will closing the state's huge budget gap mean big cuts in spending for education? Well, it could mean fewer teachers and, of course, impacts to programs.
A broad coalition of educators, local school boards, and superintendents is working very hard to prevent that. They call it the What Will Our Children Lose Coalition. And joining us now are Patrice McCarthy, Deputy Director and General Counsel for CABE, that's the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, and Dr. Joe Cirasolo, the Executive Director of the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. Jen?
Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So I know there's a concern about cuts to education. The deficit mitigation bill that was just passed, that does have some issues impacting a trickle down with education, right?
Yes,
Explain
it
those to
does.
us.
And that while those cuts are fairly modest, and we applaud the governor and the members of the General Assembly for continuing to maintain support for public education, they will have an impact on services. And in addition, there were cuts to the State Department of Education staff, particularly to the Talent Office and the Commissioner's Network program. Those are resources that some of our most challenged districts rely on. And we're really moving in a direction where our State Department of Education is going to become strictly a regulatory agency and unable to provide the support that districts need.
Dr. Joe, where is this heading for you? I mean, I can't imagine. In some cases, the classes are already stressed. Teachers are stressed, and if you start losing positions and programs get cut that are making a difference, what can we say about education? Isn't education like a number 1 or 2 priority?
Well, what's going to happen is that we will not have the school system we have had. And the effects of that are something we really need to consider, because it isn't just something that happens to education. When you cut education, what you're doing is increasing future expenditures in the criminal justice system. Most of the people who are in our prisons do not have high school degrees. You're increasing expenditures for social and emotional health, because when people are not well educated, they're not well adjusted, and that increases things. You're also decreasing future revenue, because the people are not well educated, they're not getting jobs, and then the revenue for the state goes down. So that the ripple effects are things people really need to look at. And that's why we're saying that we want the legislature, we know this is a difficult time, and so we're not asking for more money, but we're saying just don't cut us. Leave us where we are now. Let us get by these next 2 or 3 years that are tough without putting us in a position where 3 years from now, we've got to make up a lot of ground that we will have lost.
I know you had both mentioned mandates when the reading that we did before the show. How bad are these mandates on schools? And if some of them were relieved, how much could that help?
It can make a real difference, and there are over 380 mandates that have been identified. Obviously, some of them are very important and effective, but there are others that we are urging the legislature to re-examine. For instance, in the area of teacher professional development, there are about 40 hours a year of mandated unfunded subject areas of professional development. That is an issue of time at the local level, not just dollars, because that means a district can't use that professional development time to focus on their initiatives, to focus on new curriculum implementation, to focus on techniques for personalized learning. So that affects the effectiveness of our public schools.
And that's important to superintendents, obviously, the professional development, certainly.
Well, superintendents and boards are trying to lead their districts into some very innovative practices, because we need to become the school system that's appropriate for the 21st century, not one that's good for the 20th century or the 19th century. And if you have to spend so much time and so much in terms of resources just meeting mandates, you run out of energy, you run out of money, you run out of time to make the improvement. So the mandates not only have a negative fiscal impact, they have a negative impact on the kind of schooling we should be providing our children.
And these mandates you're talking about are typically the unfunded mandates. There's no money. They tell you you've got to do this, but they don't give you any money for it, and the local taxpayers have to foot that bill.
I've been in this business over 50 years. I have not yet met a mandate that's been funded.
So it just doesn't happen.
That's right.
All right, but of course you realize what a horrendous and huge, as Donald Trump would say, problem the government has here with dealing with this deficit, that whatever the reason, it's here, and then somebody's got to deal with it, and somebody's going to be hurt by it. I mean, how do you stand to a lawmaker and say, wait a minute, but do it to somebody else, not us?
What we're saying, to reiterate a comment that Joe made, the impact of cutting funds for local public education will have a negative ripple effect for years to come. And in addition, someone is going to have to pay to provide those services. We have to operate schools. It's a constitutional right in Connecticut. So it's a question of, if there are fewer resources from the state, it'll be a greater burden on local property taxpayers. And we know that that is not a well-supported concept.
What's happened?
I was going to say, school boards and superintendents have been dealing with a similar situation for years. We have never had, nobody ever told me, Joe, this is the year you can do everything. You've always had to make some adjustments. So what you do is you look to make sure the most important things get funded, and if things have to be postponed, they're the least important things or the less important things. What we're basically saying, there are a lot of things in the state budget that are not as important as education. So as far as education is concerned, just don't cut us. Leave us where we are now. Let us work it out. So again, we don't fall so far behind that 3 years from now, we've got 6 years of stuff we need to make up.
Because everything hangs on education.
Right.
Everything, the future.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
you.
2017 too, the fiscal year, because that's going to be
that's
tough.
The big one is the next fiscal year. What happens there? Right. All bets are off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both very much,
Thank you.
Patrice and Joe. And next year.